Funding for the art show was made possible by Montgomery County Arts and Cultural District, the Virginia W. Kettering Foundation, proud supporter of the arts in our community, and viewers like you. Thank you.
In this edition of the art show, a Dayton artist uses an unusual material for his canvas.
I pretty much paint brush before the brain, which means I paint first and think about it later.
We take a bluegrass lesson from a veteran fiddle player.
Bluegrass music comes right down to the real story of the American life.
And learn all about the secret lives of the members of a New Columbus indie band.
But we ended up with something that I think has a uniform feeling and texture.
It's all ahead on this edition of The Art Show. Hello, I'm Rodney Veal, and this is The Art Show. Each week, we bring you a collection of local, regional, and national artist profiles. We begin this week in the studio of Mike Elsaw. He is fast becoming an international success with his combination of color, energy, and art. For Mike, it's not about the usual, it's about the unusual.
I grew up in a small town north of here in Botkins, Ohio. And we didn't have art. I played sports, baseball, basketball. I always enjoyed art, but we didn't have any classes or no formal training. I went to school at Ohio University, journalism major, and had no formal training. Then I sold health insurance to schools and corporations. I was introduced to art by Roger Sayre. He was a well-known artist. I bought some of his art back in the 80s and met Roger. He painted on steel. Got to know Roger and took a space at the Front Street warehouses where I became his studio assistant for 3 or 4 years. And I would go out on the road and take a load of steel in the back of my truck and paint it wherever I might be in the patina of the ocean spray or the desert or sun, rain, all added to the steel. I don't really know of anybody using weathered steel on a full-time basis. It's pretty gritty. For the recycled steel, a lot of it comes from a scrapyard just a quarter of a mile from here. It represents aging and imperfection and the trials and tribulations that we go through in life. The steel always is interesting because I don't know what its former life was or where its brothers and sisters are going. And it's interesting, there's a lot of textures, imperfections, and different imagery that comes out of the steels. It also represents strength and durability. Some of my work you could stand on. I'm not sure that's much of a selling point. I pretty much paint brush before the brain, which means I paint first and think about it later. Not worried about mistakes, not knowing which direction the piece is going to hang. So I'm just enjoying the moment, being in the moment, and getting into whatever textures and colors I might be using that day. I just love the color and texture, and I paint very texturally with a lot of texture. I use pumice, steel shavings, tar, silicate sand from local gravel pits, literally everything in the store. And I just love the use of color and learning how to apply it and blend it with texture. I paint acrylic on steel, and then I finish it off with an oil, which stops the oxidation. I paint so fast, so I'm painting on 20, 30 pieces at one time. I paint 30, 40, 50, 60 days on pieces as opposed to a very short time frame. So I get different looks, different moods, different light. and it will come to you if you just let it be, if you don't try to push it. But so I paint real thin, almost watercolor-like, and so there's a lot of luminosity, depth down in the painting and in the steel. Kind of represents life and the different places and trials we've been exposed to. I think that's the biggest skill an abstract artist has, is knowing when to quit. And I think I get about 1 out of 15 that are really good, and I seem to know on those. The rest of them, it seems like I'm continually painting on them. If you don't worry about finishing it out and you just enjoy the moment, then it's not so critical to try to decide that. I do classes, and they're called Brush Before the Brain, and you paint first, you think about it later, and there's no mistakes. I also have a charity side of things. I enjoy being able to donate to charities and have them either through a class or the artwork add value that way. So I'll probably do more charitable work. Well, I'm painting big pieces, 10-footers, triplicates, that size, and I'm going organic, where I don't use as much paint and I use more of the elements of nature and texture. So I've been able to travel around, and so my inspiration comes from different locations. Appreciation of just being alive and being able to paint and have spaces to paint in.
Chances are you've seen Mike's work hanging in local establishments. You can get up close and personal with his pieces by stopping into his Color of Energy gallery in the Oregon District. Check him out at mikeelsaw.com or like him on Facebook. Kenny Seidel has literally spent his life perfecting his skill on the fiddle. Now, decades later, he's an accomplished performer and credited as someone who has helped to preserve and popularize the genre he's most passionate about, bluegrass.
There's that old tune called Cottage Hill there.
That's
okay?
right.
The key of D. Uncle John, he would get his old fiddle out, and he'd play a few tunes, and then he'd hand his fiddle to me, you know. And he'd say, "Here, Kenny," he said, "take my old fiddle," and he said, "How about giving me a little bit of the Arkansas Traveler?"
Music is a powerful tool, connecting people to the stories of Ohio. Kenny Seidel is an Ohio story, a humble fiddle player born in Toboso, Ohio. He grew up with 4 brothers and 4 sisters, all musically inclined. When he was 4.5 years old, his father gave him a small fiddle for Christmas.
When I was growing up, there was a fiddle player down in Charleston, West Virginia, and his name was Clark Kessinger. And my dad told him, he said, "Kenny," he said, "boy," he said, "I'd love to hear you learn to play that fiddle like the Kessinger brothers."
Kenny learned how to play that fiddle all right. He went from playing in front of his first audience at the age of 5 to winning countless fiddle contests, playing in bands, and on to receiving the National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship Award in 1988. He was most recently awarded the Ohio Heritage Fellowship Award from the Ohio Arts Council in July of 2012.
A lot of them are young guys has tried to copy his stuff, and they use it a lot. He's done a lot for a lot of fiddle players, whether they're bluegrass or whatever. He might have cleaned the fiddle players up a little bit, you know, to make them play a little more smoother and stuff. I don't know. I couldn't say too much one way or the other about, because it's hard to change a bluegrass player.
You can be a real good fiddle player, but I'll tell you, one of the things you got to have is a real good accompaniment. And I'll tell you, I have one sitting in there right now, Troy Herdman. He's a real machine on that guitar. Proud of Troy. Yes, sir.
Troy and Kenny have been playing bluegrass together since the 70s, and while they would never admit it, may be partly responsible for the resurgence of bluegrass music.
Back then, a lot of the people really had a kind of a hard time getting them to take a hold of it, to like it, you know. And you play a country song and they say, boy, I love that, you know. And but you'd play a bluegrass tune, you know, and they just seem like they kind of just drop off, you know. I mean, it's like you left them in an open field somewhere, you know.
One of the biggest misconceptions about bluegrass is that it's ancient, when actually bluegrass music started in the late 30s and early 40s of the last century. Another common misconception is that it's an ignorant style that takes no effort to learn to play, that only idiots would listen to it.
The way I see it today, bluegrass music comes right down to the real story of the American life, the way people, grows up and lives in our country.
There are two ways in which you might think of bluegrass as traditional music. One, it draws a part of its repertoire from traditional sources. Another way that you could think of bluegrass as traditional is that the styles of playing the instruments and the styles of singing are learned less in schools and colleges and conservatories and more from musician to musician, or within families, or within communities, which is a, quote, traditional way of learning a cultural form.
Kenny has taught many a fiddle player, teaching by ear instead of music. Both his formal and informal jam sessions have resulted in another generation of fiddle players.
With the fiddle, the bow is really the hard part on the violin. You know what I mean? Yeah, I mean you can run fingers all over the place, but you got to know how to operate that, swing that bow back and forth, or get the right technique there. You know.
Bluegrass has a lot of complex syncopation in it that you can always tell a new or an amateur bluegrass band from a professional or an accomplished bluegrass band, because they don't get the timing quite right. And it takes years, first to hear it, and then to do it on your own, and then to do it with 4 or 5 other people.
He'll play one tune one time, he'll put something in it, and then maybe the next time he'll think about it a little different way, and you got to kind of pay attention to what's going on. You can't guess what he's going to do.
These days, you'll find Kenny, dubbed a national music treasure by the National Endowment for the Arts, judging national fiddle contests and playing in local joints with the Frosty Morning Bluegrass Band. The joy on his face is infectious, but you won't find him touting his achievements, nor would he ever take credit for preserving and promoting bluegrass in Ohio. He'd tell you he's just playing music.
He's a good feller, and he's a good fiddle player. And you can sit down with him and have a little fun playing music. And he's willing to help anybody. And we've been good friends for a long time. And I hope we can keep it up.
This quiet and unassuming man is still just playing music with his band, the Frosty Morning Bluegrass Band. You can find them performing on Mondays at the Buckeye Eatery in Hebron, Ohio.
To view any of tonight's stories again or watch an episode in its entirety, watch The Art Show on demand at thinktv.org/The Art Show. You'll also find bonus features and extended interviews on select artists.
Sticking with music, Dave Bucher and the Historians is a Columbus-based indie band. Here's an inside scoop into the origin of the band's name and a front row seat to their first music video.
My name is Dave. I'm a science educator, and I sing and play guitar in the band.
I'm Joe. I'm a preschool teacher, and I play drums.
My name is Brooklyn, and I play keys and sing.
My name is Leanna, and I sing harmonies, and I am a science educator. My name is Paul. I work at Sam Ash Music and I play keys and sing in the band.
My name is Mark. I work for a textbook company and I play bass guitar.
The name is because it's sort of our philosophy that songwriting is the act of documenting your own emotions and experiences and of those that you know that may have otherwise gone undocumented. So you're kind of there taking snapshots and putting those in files so everybody can kind of remember those things. I think in terms of producing an album, that's down to an individual basis. If you want to make a certain kind of music and you want to record it and you want it to be good, it's all dependent on how hard you work.
Just last week I said it kind of felt like a musical soundtrack where it had a theme that it started with and came back to and kind of finished with.
Yeah, it definitely does. And that theme is the title, the line, "What Can Bring You Back to Me?" That shows up in 3 different songs.
You hear with sweeter tears that can bring you back to me.
We worked really hard on this record to kind of find a sound, and not in a kind of we need to write songs that are going to fit this mold, because that feeling would be a little bit boring, but we ended up with something that I think has a uniform feeling and texture that makes it feel like an album. About a month ago, we filmed a music video. We filmed it at Cafe Kerouac Coffee Shop, which is down on High Street near OSU's campus.
It's been very good to us over the years as well.
Yeah, we've played there a lot. Mike, who owns it, is incredibly good to us. You will notice in the video that Paul is not facing the band, and we wanted Paul to be facing the band, but when we tried to move the piano, the leg fell off. So,
if you go there and find that the piano has fallen over,
don't tell him. I think it was already broken, but Mike might not be happy with us.
Winter blew a chill through my window to my bones, so I followed your footsteps in the snow. Oh, and they led me to your door, let me feel some warmth, and I remembered what my thawing heart is for. Spring came, you stood just like Eve with an apple, and so we built our paradise in Tower of Babel. And as we climbed up to the top, we knew even if we dropped, it hardly mattered. Not even God could make us stop. There must be something about the weather as it's changing. All these molecules of air trying to keep us separated. I know change is what we need desperately. I'm just sorry that I ever had to leave. The heat of the summer melted us together, and so we joked about our plans and the opinion of my brother. But as I wandered through our halls, thinking of it all, I have to wonder if jokes will lead us to our fall. Must be something about the weather as it's changing. All these molecules of air trying to keep us separated. I know change is what we need desperately. I'm just sorry that I ever had to leave.
Now that time's past, I've changed, and I'm sorry for the struggle. I can build a paradise and be a better angel.
But as I hear you full of shame, calling out my name, I have my doubts if things could ever be the same.
My
Must be something about the weather as it's changing. All these molecules of air trying to keep us separated. I know change is what we need desperately. I'm just sorry that I ever had to leave.
Support Ohio talent. Read their blog, keep up with show dates, and buy their albums at davebucher.com. Finally, tonight, architect Garrett Finney had an out-of-this-world job designing living quarters for NASA spacecrafts. Now Finney is applying his knowledge of the great beyond to an earthbound vehicle for exploration.
I camped a lot as a kid, and then I went to a serious outdoorsy camp where I learned to pick plants and eat them, and go hiking and canoeing and kayaking, and a general respect for the outside. And then I found architecture in the middle of college as a thing that synthesized all my interests, that, you know, reading novels and listening to music and playing outside and just being an observant person in the world. Eventually that led me to furniture design. And at one point I visited a friend who worked at NASA and had this dream that I could live in New York and design furniture for Mars. NASA created this office that I was as equipped for as anyone else. They were coping with the engineering problem of supporting life in space. So they started hiring a few architects to try to think about, you know, not beauty so much, but quality of life. So how do you account for the fact that these two people are from different countries, they speak different languages, they're in a stressful situation. So at some point I left NASA and devoted myself to earth design. Our RV is a good thing. A lot of people have them. What is an appropriate RV that's sensitive to the environment, that encourages people to get outside, that is not a house on wheels? So all that research led to Cricket, where it's like, what performance specifications can I put together for a trailer that means, in a systemic way, you don't have to buy a new car, that a lot of four-cylinder things can tow a Cricket. It sleeps 2 adults and 2 kids. It's appropriate at campgrounds that like RVs. It's appropriate off the grid because you can go for 4 or 5 days a week with solar power and battery power. Comfortable camping halfway between a tent and a house on wheels. And then the Firefly, which is behind me, is an extension of that. So this is a 600-pound toolbox luggage rack that you happen to be able to sleep and sit comfortably inside. So that means it can be thrown in the back of a small pickup truck and go very far off-road if that's your thing. Or it can be attached to a tiny utility trailer and hauled by a mini club van. This is our first prototype. Haven't really thought about colors too much, but it can be colored. It can be, you know, if it's aluminum and glinting in the sun, it could be like a reflection on a pond. You know, we want to be recessive in that way and be part of an ecosystem of the ecology, certainly, but aesthetically, and blending in as much or as little as you want to. Whether this is on a street corner with a mobile DJ pumping out music or on the top of a mountain somewhere hoisted by a helicopter, that's really fun to think about it. How do you design something that allows all those uses and the human? We have this option of our lunar lander legs that you can put on to take it off a truck or off a trailer and have it standing in a field or on top of a mountain. This you can see is a double bed. I mentioned all the racks outside. We have places to attach things on the inside. All these seat cushions, this is double bed size. Flip up to provide access to your gear or potentially for sitting inside on a rainy day. So you can put on and off muddy boots. These are our interior racks, made for attaching anything, for hanging lights, wet towels and clothes, for strapping your, cleaning up your room. You get to be as compulsively neat or as messy as you please. Windows with a magical clicking option. Shade screen miracle, not my design. Standard procedure in European campers. We can go out and drive this on a dirt road and see what falls apart. Is it leaking? Does it let bugs in? Do we wish we had a screen door? All these things. That's why there are 4 or 5 or 10 prototypes on the way to a real product. Design is an iterative process, and improvement really is an iterative process. For me, in my path, it's been humans and performance and machines and methods of manufacturing and materials and the environment, because everything is in fact knitted together. So you really have to be conscious and self-conscious of the way it's knitted together. I'm a designer, but when you discover that your designer brain applies over here in an unexpected spot, and solving that problem actually solves this problem, is really beautiful and worthwhile.
And that wraps it up for this edition of The Art Show. You should go out there and actively participate in all the arts and culture that's happening in your community. I'm going to try to. Until next time, I'm Rodney Veal, and thanks for watching.
Funding for the Art Show was made possible by Montgomery County Arts and Cultural District, the Virginia W. Kettering Foundation, proud supporter of the arts in our community, Ohio Arts Council, Ohio Humanities Council, and viewers like you. Thank you.